When is a shot not just a shot?
When the cow is walking in the field and it will happen one time and the sun is going down, like, where do I put my camera so it means something, so it becomes a cinematic image that has a meaning and that means something else than just a cow walking on the field at the end of the day.
When Denis Villeneuve directs a movie, he never shoots anything without a purpose. Everything has meaning.
You have what the movie's saying at the surface, and you're trying to build layers that people will perceive, not necessarily intellectually, but will subliminal.
I wasn't planning on making a video about Dune, but then I saw Dune Part 2. Like a lot of other people, I was absolutely blown away by the sheer scale of filmmaking. And then I saw this shot. Why? We'll get there. But first, let's talk about how Dune visually tells a story. In this video, I'll be using clips of my MovieMaker Magazine interview with Denis Villeneuve. The reason why you're seeing my face is really because I want to talk a lot about Dune Part 2 and how Denis juxtaposes scenes from Part 1 into Part 2, but I don't have enough footage to show from Dune Part 2. Needless to say, spoilers ahead, I'm mostly going to talk about Denis' use of layered juxtaposition of images. Let's first talk about how Denis shoots Paul's internal conflict with the Bene Gesserit and their myth around him. First shot that stood out to me was on Caladan. Here Paul is centered until he's asked to use the voice. Then we move to this medium off-center shot. This is important because Paul is uncomfortable with this aspect of his life.
The book is a very internal book. It's a book that is constructed with you are following, you have access to the thoughts of the characters. And the idea here was to try to translate this approach without having to hear their inner process. It's what I was really trying to, with the actors acting, if I can say, was trying to make sure that the audience will understand how each character goes into and feel their strategies and their paranoia in each scene.
When Denis goes on to shoot Paul's landing on Arrakis and the people's call of Lisan al-Gaib, he shows it in a wide because Paul is very far from this myth of himself. So let's talk about the sandworm. In Part 1, where Paul first sees Worm Sign, he's framed far away from the worm. What really struck me was Paul's first steps onto the sand. It was shot like this. Denis has gone on to say in interviews that he uses shots of hands and feet because there's something honest about them, which is why I think this shot is so important. The spice rig scene and the sandworm riding scene are direct mirrors of each other. Paul touches the sand, he's framed against the worm, but this time, instead of someone from House Atreides saving Paul, he rides the worm. This is why this shot is so significant. This is Paul, whether ultimately good or bad, him standing up on his feet for the very first time. The last thing I want to talk about is the Gom Jabbar scene. There's this moment in Part 2 where Paul contemplates what he needs to do. Does he take the narrow path through? It reminded me of the scene where the Reverend Mother asks Paul to put his hand in the box. Paul asks, "What's in the box?" This is an attempt to control him while his mother is outside, unable to help him. This manifests in the decision for Paul to either not get revenge for House Atreides or to let himself die, kill Paul Atreides, and become Lisan al-Gaib. This is why that final scene is so important. When Paul says silence to the Reverend Mother, the woman who used the voice against him, this is him saying, "You will not control me." His mother is no longer in the background. She's up front and center. Denis uses close-ups to show introspection. But when this really pays off for Paul is in the way he frames wides, in the literal big picture. Here, Paul is juxtaposed the same size as the worm, showing his journey to power through sheer scale. He repeats this scale here, when he's gotten the Fremen to fight for him. And finally, in the last scene, where all the Fremen are behind him, as Lisan al-Gaib, Paul has made the choice to keep his hand in the box. Only a world of pain exists then, and the holy war ahead of him. So the next time you're making a movie, how can you use juxtaposition of images to create subtext, to create a bigger world, a bigger internal journey for your characters? Show me. When you go and watch Dune Part 2 and rewatch Part 1, talk to me in the comments. Tell me what the things that you've seen. Let's talk about it. And of course, thank you to MovieMaker for letting me use that interview. Thank you so much for watching this video. See you on the next one.